So I just want to say this is the second week in our 6 week session, which is basically an introduction to the practices of heartfulness and to meditation and cleaning and all that heartfulness has to offer. There's many different types of practices. It's a very simple method. I've been doing it for most of my life. For about 46 years now, I've been doing heartfulness practice. And prior to that, I also practiced other things. When I started out, I was really started with Christianity and Christian mysticism. And then I really got into Zen and Buddhism, heavily into Zen for years when I was really young. And then I got into Taoism, which I really liked, because I'm a nature-oriented person. So, and I found that heartfulness is also nature-oriented. So I happened on to heartfulness when I was 18 years old and started it. And, long story short, I had some really amazing and convincing inner experiences, which is what I was looking for. I really have never been interested in studying. I appreciate all of the religions and philosophies and different paths. I do. But I was never really interested in studying all of that. The only thing I was ever interested in was what we call enlightenment or realization or emergence with the ultimate. I really wanted to have the experience. I didn't want to read about the experience. I wanted to have the experience. And so I was very intent on accomplishing that. And when I happened on to this path, which I feel one of the masters, Babaji, I feel he found me. I don't think I found him. I think he found me. And I did have that and many, many more experiences beyond my wildest expectations. My heart and mind were completely fulfilled in that regard. So, and I just will share this, is that in the beginning, experiences are really important, because if you don't experience anything, then nothing's really happening. And I know I meet so many thousands of people through Quora and through different ways in my life who have been on the spiritual journey for a long time. And so many people I meet, they say, oh, yeah, well, I've been doing my practice, for 20 years now or 30 years now. And yet they have had no experience of anything, and yet they don't want to try other things. So that's not good. We should have some confirmation that what we're doing is working. And in heartfulness, you do get that right away, that something's working within your system, and you can start to become sensitive to that, and you can start to what we call read your condition, understand the work that's going on within you, in your consciousness. And that's very rewarding. But, in the long term of the spiritual journey, eventually you get to a point where you don't have any experiences because it's never really about an experience. Ultimately, it's about, becoming, that subtlest and fullest you that is who we really are. And when we become that more and more that to our fullness, then there's little left for experience, which is good. All right, so I think we can get started now. Okay. So, welcome for those of you who are attending for the first time. I'm really glad you're here. Thank you. I want to let you know that everyone in these sessions comes from Quora. And so it's a big connection and a big family in that regard. It's been amazing. We've been doing these sessions for over a year now. And we have people from every part of the planet that's attending this. So that's a beautiful thing, because we are one world, one planet, one community. Okay, so this is week 2 of a 6-week introduction to meditation and the heartfulness practices. And this week, what I'm going to talk about is one of the most important aspects of the heartfulness practice, and it's something that's very hard to understand, and that makes it seem a little bit mysterious, but it's called pranahuti, which means the offering of prana. And prana is the subtlest life essence. It's so subtle that I hesitate to call it an energy, though sometimes you'll hear it referred to as an energy, but it's the subtlest energy that's been around since the very beginning of creation. And so we work with that. And the other name for this pranahuti, the more common name that we hear, is called transmission, and more formally called yogic transmission. And yogic transmission was introduced by the founder of this Heartfulness method. His name was Ramchandra. We more commonly call him Lalaji, which is an affectionate name. It means like revered grandfather. Okay, so we call him Lalaji. And he was born in 1873 and passed in 1931. Now, Lalaji was a very unique spiritual being. As the story goes, he awoke when he was only 7 years old. He was fully illumined and completely knew, that he was here for a reason. And he wound up, to make a long story short, he wound up rediscovering this method of pranahuti or yogic transmission, which he said has been lost to this world for nearly 10,000 years. It used to be a common thing in ancient civilization, and it had been lost. And so he rediscovered it and he reintroduced it. And his successor, who we call Babaji refined the practice and made it simpler and made it easy, because they knew, these masters, they knew. And if you read what they were discussing amongst themselves, they were well aware that the world was fast reaching a point where it would become so complicated and life would become, it would become so busy that it would be hard to take up any intensive spiritual pursuits. And the world would really need to have a way to reach spiritual heights and to evolve themselves. And so this transmission is the very tool that enables the people of today to experience the highest states of spirituality. As Babaji has said, that we can attain the highest states of spirituality as any saint or master in all past history. So that's a big promise and a high objective, but from my experience, Babaji wasn't one to make idle promises. He was one to show you practically and give you the inner experience, which, he certainly could do. So today we have an organization that's spanning the world, several millions of people, and it's growing and growing and growing. And the key about it is it's not that heartfulness is something that you join. Heartfulness is sort of a way of life, and it's a practice, a set of practices that anyone from any path, any religion, any philosophy, or none can take up and benefit from. No one has to leave anything that they're doing. It's not like you're joining some new group. It's not like that. Sometimes it seems like that, but it's not really like that. So in our group, we've got people from we have a woman here in Cleveland who's a Catholic Ursuline nun. She's amazing. She's a trainer in heartfulness. She's been to India with us so many times. And we have people from the Muslim faith, the Jewish faith, Christian faith, all backgrounds, people practicing this from TM and Yogananda's method and all different methods. They utilize this practice. So I want you to think about it in those terms, that this is a practice that you utilize. Okay, now I want to talk about this transmission today. So it's hard to explain. And the reason it's hard to explain is because it's something that can't be seen. We can't put our finger on it. And as Babaji said, the transmission can't be felt, but the effect of the transmission can be felt. So we experience what the transmission is able to do for us. And the analogy that I often give is one where, if we think of the mind like the ocean, well, the ocean is susceptible to all sorts of wave patterns and weather patterns, and our mind is like that. And so on the ocean, sometimes when the clouds roll in, the waves start to kick up and get really big, and occasionally there's something really big like a cyclone or hurricane, and then it gets really intense on the ocean of our mind. So we can think about transmission more like the sun's rays. So above all of that weather, the sun is still shining. The sun and the sun's light are a constant. It's a steady state. And so in this practice, when we receive this transmission, it's something that dissipates the clouds and brings everything to a still point. And our mind welcomes that steady state energy. It welcomes it because the mind naturally, in its natural state, is very regulated and calm. So this transmission helps us to not only still the mind and meditate, but to go very, very deep within, and go so deep, in fact, that, partway through the meditation, you don't even know where you are. You're completely absorbed in your inner condition. And at the end of the meditation, if I say that's all, or a trainer says that's all, you hear that. Even though you're deep, it's almost, you can think you're sleeping, but you still hear that's all. And then you very slowly start to come out of that deep meditative state. And you realize that you're now in a completely different state of consciousness. Totally different. All of the duality is gone. And you feel relaxed and centered. And there's a real sense of the real meaning of the word yoga, which is to yoke or to unite. We experience that at the end of all of our meditations. We experience a union of mind, body, spirit. Everything seems unified. And this is the wonder of this thing we call pranahuti, or transmission, that it enables us to do that. Babaji had said that reaching these deep states of samadhi in the past, that there were yogis who would spend, 20, 30 years to get to that point where they were reaching that sort of depth in their meditation. And now, someone who comes and experiences this transmission for the very first time can reach that type of state in one sitting. So it's amazing. And what this shows is that we as human beings are evolving now at a very rapid pace. We're evolving. Not only are we've been evolving in a physical way over millions of years, in a very slow biological way, adapting to changes in the environment. But, within the past 150 years or less, we've seen an amazing burst of evolution, because it's the evolution that's happening on the mental plane. Our mind is suddenly evolving at such a rapid pace that we can just look around and see what's happened in the world. 150 years ago, we were riding horses. We didn't have electricity. And look where we are today. We created that. We human beings. We created these vast cities. We've created this amazing technology. We've gone into space. We have incredible modern conveniences. But in spite of all that, we're not completely happy. Our minds are unregulated. And there's a lot of frustration, and this lifestyle in the world, though we can solve all of the world's problems today, we can solve all of the world's problems. The problem is that human nature is not so easy to fix. And Babaji said human nature is the hardest thing to change. And so we're still, in a world susceptible to greed, a world based on transaction, a world where love is based on transaction, a world where everything is transactional. And we created a world where we have to pay to live here. What a ridiculous idea. Can you believe we humans have created a world where we have to pay to live on this planet? Why do we have to pay to live here? It's our planet. We should have figured that out a long time ago. And so we're facing a lot of problems. But, I firmly believe that on the heels of our mental evolution, which, by the way, this transmission causes growth. The transmission brings growth. And it's a funny thing to observe that right at the turn of the century, when Lalaji was born and reintroduced this transmission, which Babaji said covers the whole world, it's so funny that it's just right at that time when this mental evolution suddenly takes off and we see this exponential growth of the arts, of music, of science, of technology. But the transmission also causes the negative tendencies to grow. It's unbiased. And so we see in the world, people having unregulated minds. This is causing that to amplify. So that's where we're at. Now, we're on the heels of what I can only call evolution of consciousness. And this is a term I've heard Daji use and other spiritual guides. I've heard many people say this term. So this evolution of consciousness is the next thing that's happening for us. Now, in order for the entire world to transform, I believe that the transmission can accomplish something like that. And I think it's working in that direction, because obviously if we're all Quorans and we're reading on Quora, we see that a lot of people are waking up all over the world. It's a common topic nowadays. But if we want to make a real change in the world, it's something we're all going to have to participate in, for one, and we'll have to utilize a tool that brings us all together, which the transmission, I feel, does, because you don't have to belong to anything to experience it, and it creates a sense of unity in us, no matter what our background or belief. So I think this transmission is unique in that it can be a way to bring people together in the world. But there's one aspect, and I'm going to talk about this next week, that is absolutely essential if we want to have the full benefit of the transmission and take things in a positive direction. And that's something called cleaning. Sometimes we refer to it as rejuvenation. And it's another heartfulness practice that goes hand in hand with this transmission. And this is very important because we are the sum total of our past experiences. That's who we are right now in this moment. We're, everything we think and the way we act and all our patterns of action and reaction are based on, experiences that we've had in the past. They've sort of like been grooves in a record, and we can't, jump out of those grooves. We're in these repeating patterns of things. So the cleaning aspect of heartfulness allows us to remove all of these past impressions. And some of that work we'd have to do on our own. We can apply our will to remove the day's impressions ourselves. So this is a powerful aspect of the practice. Then, how do we remove these deeper grooves, these deeper patterns that we're subjected to? We do that when we come together in these group sessions with a trainer that helps us greatly to get to these past deeper impressions. We can remove those. And when you have an individual sitting with a trainer, whether that's through an app or, in my opinion, preferably long distance via Zoom or in person if possible, then this work goes very, 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 very deep. And in the group, it does too. And you start to feel lighter because as these impressions from our past get cleared away, we're sort of relieving a weight. And this weight is something that's pulling us backwards. Time goes one direction, and we're trying to be present and move forward in the here and now, going forward. But we have this weight of our past that acts like an inertia on our future growth. And it's essential that we relieve ourselves of that inertia that's pulling us backwards in order for us to truly evolve. And you can think of this like trying to climb a mountain with a backpack of 100 pounds. And, we see these mountain climbers with these huge backpacks on, and they're carrying oxygen and all of this that they need to reach these higher altitudes. But the higher you go, the heavier the weight of that backpack becomes. And what a relief it is when we can set down all the weight of that we're carrying. And it's kind of like the climbers who are climbing Mount Everest, and they have to carry a lot of equipment up to the different base camps. But then they leave their equipment at each base camp, and then being much lighter now, they can ascend even higher. So the spiritual journey is a lot like this climbing of Mount Everest, is that we're having to, at first we're carrying all our baggage with us. But then as we go along, we start to set some of this stuff down, which enables us to climb a little bit higher into a higher, more subtle atmosphere. And eventually we're able to reach the summit, in which case then we're in a completely different environment, where we're in an environment of such subtlety that we can barely breathe there. There's few people that can make it to the top of Mount Everest without oxygen, but there are people who have done it. So then from there, and this is all figuratively speaking, then where do we go? Well, we have to be able to become so light that we float off the top of that mountain and off into the ethers. And that's how light our consciousness can become. And this is the progression of our spiritual evolution, is when I say that our consciousness is becoming lighter. It's not that we're gaining something. It's not that we're, becoming something new. What's really happening is we're unburdening ourselves of the weight of our identity. It's a journey of identity. We're laying down the burden of our identity, and we're able to re-experience our true lightness of being. Our true lightness of being. And now I want to share a personal experience with you all. And for those of you who have been attending these sessions, you've heard me say this before, but I would like to tell it. Past couple of years, I had a lot of, I was blessed with some very difficult physical situations that I was in. And out of all of those, the worst one was that I was prescribed a medicine that was supposed to determine how to fix a certain problem that I was having of my muscles all contracting. It was really something very strange that was happening to me. And when they gave me this medicine, I had an extremely severe reaction, like a 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 reaction. Horrible. And it put me into a deep, deep sadness and deep depression. And I couldn't, and you're not allowed to just stop taking it. you have to wean yourself off of it because it can have even worse effects if you stop taking it. So I was in this conundrum where I'm having this severe reaction. I mean, talk about a dark night of the soul. This was just awful. And, in the peak of this, I remember one night where I felt so bad. I just felt like I was 100 years old, and I felt like my life was a failure and everything about me was a failure. And I felt like I had no friends in the world. And I went through this really dark, depressive state and I'm not at all like that. It was entirely caused by this medicine. And it was terrifying. And I just knew, I said to myself, finally, I've got to just close my eyes. I've got to reach out to the master and ask for help. And I sat in my chair real late in the night downstairs. And I just kind of placed myself before the inner guide, the inner master. And almost instantly, I felt like that. It happened that fast. And I found that suddenly I woke up into a totally different place. I was in a vast, infinite ocean of light. I was there. I was in this infinite, beautiful ocean of luminosity. And it was so beautiful. And it was so complete and so, I want to say the word loving, but it was something so much more than that, something more than that even. And I was completely aware, fully aware, more aware than I am here now talking to you. And I thought to myself, I must be a being of light. And so I tried to perceive, I must have a light body. And so I tried to perceive if I had a body. And I didn't. I was only light. I was only light. It was incredible. And I felt Babaji was my first spiritual guide. I felt Babaji was there. I felt it was his essence that was pulling me towards himself through this vast, infinite ocean of luminosity and love. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever experienced in my life. And then I went really deep into meditation. Then I came out, and over the next few days, I was able to finally get off of that medicine and, become more normal again. But what an experience that was. And, a number of weeks after that experience, I opened one of Babaji's books. And in this book, someone had asked him a question. And the question was, Babaji, do insects have a soul? And Babaji says, yes, insects, all life has a soul, even dogs, animals, they all have a soul. He said, because everything is light. That's what he said. Because everything is light. And so when I talk about I have to use the word becoming, but what we're regaining or restoring within ourselves is this reality that at the very source, we are beautiful, divine beings of light. And all that's happened to us is over eons of time and eons of experiences through our many different bodies, that we have intermingled, our consciousness has intermingled with matter. And this began to form coverings after coverings after coverings around our light. And at first we were beings of light bodies, and then those bodies became denser and denser. And you've heard this term chakras. Each of these chakras is a dimension, a universe unto itself. And we exist in all of those dimensions. But our consciousness now is brought down here into this densest material plane. And we only identify now with our densest covering, this material covering that we call the human form, the human body. And this is all we think we are. And that's the illusion, is that we are not our body and we are not these thoughts. We are something much, much more vast and infinite and beautiful in our scope. But it's up to us to apply the tools we can have at our disposal to evolve ourselves out of this identification with the body and with our thoughts, and to start to regain that luminous nature. And that, dear friends, is what we call the spiritual journey. Okay. So I would like us to all meditate together now and have an experience of this yogic transmission. And my suggestion is to just be open to receive. Just be open. Open your heart. Be open to receive without expectation. And just see what comes to you. And, if you find that, you're starting to go deeper within, that's okay. That's what we want to do. And if you find maybe your head is starting to drop down, that's okay. Just go with that. Go deep within. And at the end of this session, you'll hear me say, that's all. And I'll gently bring us out of the meditation. So with that, let's get started. So please sit comfortably. I want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you and appreciate that you took the time. And please try to come back and experience these sessions so you get a real taste of this transmission and what's available for your own evolution. So with that, all the best. And I'm going to go off camera and I'll meet you back in 5 minutes. We'll see you.